GB News Radio. It's very simple. We're on your radio player and TuneIn apps, on your smart speaker, phone or tablet, or online at gbnews.uk.
Take us with you wherever you go. GB News Radio.
You never have to miss a moment of the People's Channel.
Join my show Farage, 7 p.m. till 8 p.m. Monday through Thursday, and there you will get opinion, analysis, debate, and I'll cover stories that nobody else dares to touch.
You've been cancelled. Join the club.
Oh my goodness me. And then for the last 15 minutes, talking pints. We're over a drink. We have a civilised conversation with someone. We very often disagree, but we do it in a grown-up way. Come and join me on Farage.
Hello, I'm Simon Evans. Join me on GB News for Headliners at 11 p.m, where I'll be joined by two of the country's top comedians as we take a look at tomorrow's newspapers tonight. If it's a big story, we'll be covering it, I guarantee, but we'll also have some fun along the way. That's GB News Headliners at 11 p.m. We won't put you to sleep, unlike some of the other paper review shows out there. So join us, 11 p.m, 7 nights a week.
Hey, welcome along. What's the big news out of the Conservative Party conference? Oh my God. In the words of Lloyd Bridges, I guess I picked the wrong week to quit sniffing glue. We will try instead to stay focused on stuff that matters over the next hour. The appalling state of the British police. Caroline Farrow is with us. The migrant tide continues to wash in on the southern shore. Alex Kashuta is here. The biggest public scandal of our age. We will get into it with Dr. Naomi Wolf. And why is Steve Baker, a hardcore Brexiteer turned Minister of the Crown, suddenly apologising to Europe? Baroness Hoey is here and she will take that one up. All that plus the most important part of the show, that is you. Give it your best. You can email me, gbviews@gbnews.uk. You can tweet me at gbnews. It's all coming your way after Polly Middlehurst with the latest news. Over to you, Polly.
Thanks, Mark. How very kind of you. Here's the latest from the GB newsroom. The Chancellor has exclusively told GB News his medium-term fiscal plan will not be brought forward and will be delivered as planned at the end of November. Kwasi Kwarteng is under pressure to give more details on how he'll reduce the country's debt. It follows market turmoil, which saw sterling plummet after the mini-budget was announced 11 days ago. The Chancellor told us fiscal decisions were made during a very difficult period.
It was a very quick time that we did it. And also you've got to remember the context. I mean, what was extraordinary about that month was that we had a new government and also we had the sad passing of Her Majesty Queen Elizabeth II. So we had a nation in mourning. And then literally, I think 4 days after the funeral, we had the mini-budget. It was a high-speed, high-pressure environment. And we could have got, as David Cameron used to say, prepared the pitch a bit better.
Well, Shadow Chancellor Rachel Reeves says she's written to Kwasi Kwarteng demanding greater transparency.
This coming Friday, when the Office of Budget Responsibility gives the government their forecast, the public should see it as well, and financial markets need to see it. The volatility that we've had in the last week and a half with a huge spike in borrowing costs for government and also for families through mortgage rates is causing huge anxiety. And government now need to get a grip, publish those forecasts. If they've got nothing to hide, what is stopping them?
The Home Secretary says we need common sense policing, unashamedly on the side of the law-abiding majority. Speaking at the Tory party conference, Suella Braverman urged the police to investigate every neighbourhood crime and to, quote, stop policing pronouns on Twitter. She also promised to publish league tables to show how well each force is doing. The Home Secretary slammed what she's calling militants and extremists on the left and said she would lock up protesters such as Extinction Rebellion who break the law.
It's not a human right to vandalise property. It's not my freedom of expression to protest violently. No, you can't just start a riot or glue yourself to the roads and get away with it.
And in other news, a 14-year-old boy is in custody after being arrested on suspicion of the murder of another teenager in Gateshead. Northumbria Police says it found a 14-year-old boy with injuries consistent with having been caused by a bladed article just after 8 o'clock last night. A 13-year-old girl also remains in custody after being arrested on suspicion of assisting an offender. We're on TV, online and on DAB+ radio. This is GB News. Back now to Mark Steyn.
Thank you, Polly. How am I meant to know? He looks like a Polly to me. You can't make any evaluations about anyone these days. For all I know, that is the Commonwealth Ladies weightlifting champion right there reading the news. As we often, of course, to remark, nothing works in Britain anymore, nothing in terms of basic services. The United Kingdom is exiting the developed world. If you call 999, the ambulance shows up 15 hours later. Over 10% of the population is currently on the National Health Service waiting list, and most of the rest of the population has presumably concluded there is no National Health Service, so there's no point even getting on the list. The laughingstock border force exists not to enforce the national border, but to provide concierge services for the 1,000+ young men being ferried from French waters to the southern shore by the Royal National Lifeboat Institution every night of the week. Politics? Oh, come on, the governing party can't even pull off a palace coup. They spend all year plotting against the Prime Minister, force him out over groped bottoms at the Carlton Club, spend an interminable 3 months on a leadership campaign, only to elect someone they immediately start plotting against all over again. Here is the assistant editor of The Spectator today contemplating whether this week's Prime Minister should now be replaced by the guy she trounced. Quote, "I don't get the sense that a Sunak succession would do anything." Well, hold up there. A Rishi Sunak succession. It's only 20 minutes since he lost. He's back already? This is in a column headlined, "What Does Michael Gove Want?" What does Michael Gove want? That was the runaway winner in a question to come up with a question. Runaway winner in a competition to come up with a question that not a single British subject across the planet is asking. What does Michael Gove want? Maybe he wants to be Lord Privy Seal or Secretary of State for Northern Ireland. Maybe he'd like to be Governor of the Pitcairn Islands in the South Pacific. I'd be willing to chip in towards that just so we wouldn't have to hear a peep about him for a half-decade or so. Politicians only matter if they can impact public policy. And there's not a lot of evidence for that right now. For example, there is no more comprehensively failed institution in the realm than the British Constabulary. As Parm Sandhu, former Chief Superintendent at Scotland Yard, said on this show a few weeks back, only 1.3% of all recorded crime even leads to a summons, to a court appearance, never mind a conviction. And we know that that 1.3% is overstated because the Met and other forces are massaging the figures by not recording a lot of crime. So the crime clear-up rate in the United Kingdom is now all but statistically undetectable. Would it make any difference if we simply laid off the entire British police? Well, it might cause a slight uptick in even more unsolved crimes, but on the other hand, we wouldn't have entire teams of officers in rainbow-festooned cop cars descending on the homes of law-abiding citizens to harass them for an infelicitous tweet or Instagram post. The slogan of His Majesty the King's most famous constabulary is, "The Mounties always get their man." Not in Britain. The police hardly ever get their man, but they do get you, because frankly, that's a lot easier. Which brings me back to Miss Truss's new ministry, not yet a month old. The new Home Secretary took office, urging the coppers to stop sitting around reading Twitter all day, get off their flabby arses, and try solving the occasional crime.
We need to get back to common sense policing, empowering the police to tackle the issues facing the public, not policing pronouns on Twitter or non-crime.
Well, there's a radical idea. Here's how the Surrey Constabulary reacted to Mrs. Braverman's, quote, order. Last night, they went round to the home of Caroline Farrow, the wife of a priest, and arrested her. Why did they do that? Because she's not wholly on board with transgender ideology. Surrey police can't do anything if you've been burgled or raped. But as the paramilitary wing of Pink News or Stonewall, they're doing great. The Chief Constable of Surrey Police is Gavin Stevens. Here he is. Looks like a nice chap, very smiley there. We asked him to come on the show to defend this arrest, but he wimped out. However, Caroline Farrow is with us. I should actually say that at the time he wimped out of the interview, he did eventually provide us with a statement as to why he sent all these people round to arrest Caroline. He said there had been an allegation of malicious communications and that a number of electronic devices were seized as potential evidence from this address under Section 19 of PACE. If you don't know what PACE is, there's no reason why you should know. It's the Police and Criminal Evidence Act. Anyway, it is good to see you, Caroline. This is a very topical subject, obviously, because of what Suella Braverman was saying. Taking what they say at face value, you've been charged with sending a malicious tweet or an email, something like that. Is that the case?
No, I've been released under investigation, so I don't know yet whether or not I'm going to be charged.
OK, so they come round. Do they have a warrant to enter your premises, these policemen?
It was so surreal. So it's a Monday night. I have 4 children. I'm making the family meal. I'm doing a roast chicken. And my husband says to me, oh, there's 2 policemen at the door, Caroline, and they won't speak to me. And we're quite used to having police at the door because we live in a presbytery and sometimes, you know, there are public order issues or whatever going on. As he said, they want to speak to you. So I go to the door and they said, right, we're here because we're investigating an allegation against you. And yeah, they said, we're here because we're investigating an allegation against you made by a certain person. And they said, can we come in? And I said, do you have a warrant? And straight away, this burly policeman put his hand onto my front door and said,
yeah, we saw that.
We don't need one. We don't need one. And just basically barged his way in. And they said, we are arresting you.
Are you, by the way, just let me ask you on that, because as I understand the law, it's a little different in Scotland, but in England, Wales and Northern Ireland, I understood it to be that unless there was a serious charge, they were required to get a serious crime, and they were going to arrest a criminal accused of a serious crime, they were required to have a warrant. Have you been informed that that's not the case?
Yeah, I'm not entirely clear, so I don't want to opine and give incorrect information. But I was basically, they have to have a reasonable reason to arrest you. There needs to be a good reason. And the reason that they claimed that they were arresting me was because they needed to seize my electronic devices, which is quite scary because, you know, I've been the victim of some really quite severe harassment a few years ago. There was a website producing death threats, rape threats, threatening my children even. And the police said, oh, we never seize electronic equipment. It has to be terrorism. So, you know, there they are seizing my devices. And they said they had to arrest me in order to seize my devices. Well, OK, if they had to seize my devices, they know I have children. Why don't they issue a warrant, a search warrant, come round and get my devices in the day and invite me in for interview instead of depriving me of my liberty in such an unnecessary and undignified way and in front of my children? And in fact, I mean, it was crazy because it's what they were... Sorry.
Well, we know why they're... No, we know why they're doing it in front of your children, because they want to teach you a lesson. We should say that this... You're the wife of a priest and you are not fully on board with the full transgenderist agenda, as most people in the United Kingdom are not on board with it. But so the police, who are basically ideological enforcers now, chose to stage this arrest in front of your children precisely to teach them a lesson that mummies who do bad things are gonna be treated like. So they'll tell their friends, and their friends' mummies will say, "Oh, I'd best shut up about whatever it is I'm annoyed about."
You have to wonder if that's the case. And actually, in the case of my children, it was deeply irresponsible. So my two younger children have got learning difficulties. Well, they're both diagnosed autism. And they have been extremely traumatised, and I'm so angry about it. So I know my son today had to have some extra time with the teacher because he was really worried about what happens if mummy doesn't come home from prison. My other daughter was really distraught because one of the devices they took was an iPad that we use as her homework iPad. And one of the things that she's very obsessed by is Harry Potter. And she uses Harry Potter, the Audible books, they're lovely actually, narrated by Stephen Fry. She uses them as a soothing thing. And the iPad has her entire Harry Potter collection on. And basically, it's like the police have taken away her homework Harry Potter iPad, and she doesn't understand. And the reason that they took that was because they said, "Do you, Mrs. Farrow, have access to that device?" And I said, yes. So into the evidence bag it went. I mean...
Yeah. Well, and while we're on the subject of these computers, they also went... your husband is a priest. They went and demanded to go into the parish office and seize the computers there. Now, there's no... You were then arrested and taken to Guildford Police Station, which we might be coming to, and we might do a mass demonstration out there, because this goes on every week up and down the realm, and it's getting worse and worse. And you've been accused of a white-collar crime, which is sending a malicious email or a malicious tweet, and yet they treat you like a common criminal, and they remove all your jewellery and other items. They make you take your shoes off because they say they need to get your side of the story. Why does treating you worse than they treat rapists help them get your side of the story?
And it's very undignified. The other thing is that when I was being booked into custody, I was saying this, that it felt so surreal. And I said, I can't quite believe this is happening. And the Sarge sort of looked a bit embarrassed. And then he said, well, sending malicious emails, sending abusive emails is a crime. And the PCs who'd arrested me and were booking me in said, oh, she hasn't sent any emails. She's written insulting posts on the internet. Just crazy.
Wait a minute. No, just that's a very important point in terms of malicious communications. So the coppers are standing around saying one thing, saying you posted something on the internet. This is the issue for most of us. England 3.5 centuries ago was the crucible of liberty where one could speak freely. And now these policemen, these quote-unquote policemen, are making you do a semi-strip search, taking your shoes off, taking your jewellery off, in order to interview you about your opinions.
And the thing is as well, what was really weird, so I've never been arrested before, and it is quite shocking. So they were saying, can you lift your legs up? And I wasn't lifting my legs up correctly because I wasn't quite sure what I was supposed to be doing. And they said, oh no, you need to lift them up this way because we need to check your socks for drugs. And I'm like half an hour ago, I'm in my kitchen cooking roast chicken, and now you're checking my socks for drugs. I mean, I understand that it's standard procedure, but it was just surreal.
It's not. No, it's not standard procedure. They've chosen to do this to you, and that is what is so disgraceful about these pseudo-coppers. Sir Robert Peel, the founder of British policing. Wouldn't regard that as standard procedure. The other thing it's very brave of you even to come on television and talk about it. Our friend Samantha Smith from Telford came on TV to talk about her experience with the West Mercia police, and then they went round and bullied her and intimidated her the next morning for daring to come on television and tell the truth about these third-rate coppers.
I wouldn't be surprised if they come round again, Mark, because one of the things they said to me was, "Oh, why do you want to talk about what's happened?" And I said, "Because I think it's a scandal and an outrage." And they were trying to sort of warn me off saying anything, but I just thought, you know, I need to say what's happened here. This is a scandal, this is an outrage, you know, and actually we need people to be brave and to stand up and to say this is not acceptable. You know, and what was so bizarre was I'm sat there in interview and they're showing me posts and they're not even posts I've made. They're showing me material and saying, "Can you explain this?" And I'm saying, "Well, I don't know, I didn't write it. What do you think of this?" "I don't know. I don't know why you're showing this to me. I don't know what it's about. I really don't understand." And basically, there's been an allegation that I have posted something. They've got no evidence, and they admitted that for some of the allegations they have no evidence. So they've seized my computer in order to see if there is evidence. So it's like I have to prove my innocence. And that's not how justice works.
No, wait a minute. They have no basis for seizing these computers, Caroline, and they're not even they're also computers of your family members. This is an extraordinary overreach by the police. It's staged in the most intimidating and just like they did to dear old Samantha in Telford. It's staged in the most intimidating and bullying manner because they want to make an example of you so that any other would-be Carolines around the county and around the country don't think that this is a free country where you can express your opinions. Well, thank you for coming on, Caroline. And if those buggers do come round tomorrow, you let us know, because we're not done with this guy. What is this guy called? Gavin, whatever he needs. Memorise this guy's face, ladies and gentlemen. If you see him, tell him what you think of him. Another useless chief constable who doesn't do anything about rape, who doesn't do anything about burglary, but is prepared to police tweets to the extent of arresting a vicar's wife in front of her children and then dragging her off to the cells to have her shoes removed and to have her jewellery removed. Absolutely disgraceful. Get your goons out of this lady's computers, Chief Constable Stevens. Return them and issue an apology for your sick, out-of-control thugs. Here's a thought for any residents of English towns. Right now, there's a far higher chance of getting a visit from the Plods over a, quote, transphobic tweet than there is for running an industrial-scale child rape gang. We'll get into that with the aforementioned Samantha Smith, a victim of police indifference to child sexual abuse on tomorrow night's show. Up next tonight, we'll get your thoughts on all this, GBViews at gbnews.uk, plus Alex Kashuta on migrants and Naomi Wolf on an ever more horrifying public scandal. Don't touch that dial, we're coming right back.
Weekday afternoons on GB News, we've got the whole of the UK covered. From 12 to 3, it's GB News Day with me, Mark Longhurst.
And me, Gloria Di Piero. You'll get the very latest on everything that's been going on across our great nation.
And from 3 till 6, watch out for GB News Live with me, Patrick Christys. I'm not here to mess around. With all the biggest topics and guests, you will always be up to date. GB News Day and GB News Live from 12 p.m.
Only on GB News.
The People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Hello there, it's Eamon Holmes here from Breakfast on GB News. We're not just on your television and your screens, you know.
We're on DAB plus digital radio, so you can listen to your favourite shows on the move.
If you've not yet listened to GB News Radio, it's very simple. We're on your radio player and TuneIn apps, on your smart speaker, phone or tablet, or online at gbnews.uk.
Take us with you wherever you go. GB News Radio.
You never have to miss a moment of the People's Channel.
Join my show Farage, 7 p.m. till 8 p.m. Monday through Thursday, and there you will get opinion, analysis, debate, and I'll cover stories that nobody else dares to touch.
You've been cancelled. Join the club.
Oh my goodness me. And then for the last 15 minutes, talking pints. We're over a drink. We have a civilised conversation with someone. We very often disagree, but we do it in a grown-up way. Come and join me on Farage.
Hello, I'm Simon Evans. Join me on GB News for Headliners at 11 p.m, where I'll be joined by two of the country's top comedians as we take a look at tomorrow's newspapers tonight. If it's a big story, we'll be covering it, I guarantee, but we'll also have some fun along the way. That's GB News Headliners at 11 p.m. We won't put you to sleep, unlike some of the other paper review shows out there. So join us, 11 p.m, 7 nights a week.
Lisa Townsend, who is the Surrey Police and Crime Commissioner, to whom I think that Chief Constable reports, has just issued a tweet after the interview we just did with Caroline, and she says, "I'm aware of the concerns that have been raised on social media about the arrest of a woman at her home on suspicion of malicious communications. My office has been in contact to seek clarification. I've been very clear in my personal views around sex and gender and the wider debate around the policing of social or political issues." Not happy with that, Ms. Townsend, Commissioner Townsend, because I don't actually think there should be policing of social or political issues. I'm not even sure about it. Particularly when there's no policing of crime, I don't see the point of policing social issues. GB News is the People's Channel. Let's channel what the people are saying. Catherine says about Suella Braverman's pledge to reform the police and tackle the migrant crisis. If she follows it through, she's just won the Tories the next general election. If she doesn't, she's just lost the Tories the next general election. Terry Williams says, "I've heard it. Now I'll believe it when I see it in action." You know, I'm almost getting the feeling that large numbers of viewers and listeners are familiar with politicians who talk the talk, as they say in America, but then don't walk the walk. Angel says if she isn't prevented by all the usual suspects and she can carry it through, absolutely fantastic. And Sean Mosley, slumped in cynicism, says, how many times did Priti Patel say the same thing and nothing happened? There's a little bit of movement on the channel, quote, asylum seekers. I don't mean they're now being upgraded from the Premier Inn to luxury country hotels in Lincolnshire, as reported yesterday. I mean that my old chum Alexander Downer, very convivial company, the former Australian Foreign Minister and Australian High Commissioner in London, will be heading up a new panel to come up with a way to deport these fellows. Her Majesty's Australian government was rather good at that, is rather good at that. And there is super butch talk out of the Tory conference that it may be time for the UK to quit the UN Convention on Refugees. Of course, as we've just heard, the Tories have got good at the butch talk and people are weary of it because that's usually all it turns out to be. Alex Kashuta has her own podcast on Substack full of interesting guests. Alex, is this more hot air from Mrs. Braverman, or is something going to be done?
The reaction to this depends very much on what your idea is. What is the UK in your perspective? Who has a right to live there? What basis is that right given on? And the common sense view at this time is that the UK is some sort of airport lounge. It's a general economic zone with a lot of money, which has exclusively been generated by exploiting these, Wakanda-esque places that never were, and that this place needs to atone for these crimes with an infinite liability forever, and let anyone who wants to come in through its non-existent borders in perpetuity. So this concept that the UK is solely an economic zone and, you know, has these historical sins, has at its core this idea of autonomy that we have at, you know, at the core of the liberal order. That's the main thing that people follow, that no person should be impeded in their search for happiness, for their authentic self, for their self-fulfillment. And unfortunately, I believe that many, maybe not a majority of the UK public has this idea as well, in the sense that if they're able to do whatever they want and, you know, travel wherever, do whatever, that everyone should be able to do this. And they're willing to throw their whole civilization on a pyre and burn it to a crisp for that privilege.
Well,
so, I mean...
Well, it is a whole civilization, as you put it, because this is just something that is taken for granted, that no Western nation has the right to determine who crosses its borders. That it's true of the southern border of the United States. It's true of Germany. It's true of Sweden, that if you are a developed nation, anyone who gets there can stay there. People didn't think like that half a century ago. How did it all change and become universally accepted?
I think it's, again, reducible to this concept of autonomy, because if I read the UK press, you know, how did people react to this? It was almost exclusively economic concerns. Like, what do the immigrants bring? You know, do they improve GDP? Even the most conservative take on this was that, oh, we're going to bring in the good immigrants that improve GDP, and we're going to control for the immigrants that don't. There was no consideration for anything other than the UK as an economic zone. So it wasn't about, you know, some sort of right to the existence, continuation of the peoples of the British Isles. That is anathema to the current political order. It's all about, you know, what's in it for whatever HSBC and, you know, the other big players in this, you know, who can get their own. So until the right wing adopts this idea that, you know, they might have to take the unfashionable view of speaking up for the people, the indigenous ancestral people of the British Isles, it's not going to be, you know, enough.
No, you're right. Everyone thinks that a nation state now is just like Gate 27 at Heathrow. It's whoever happens to be standing around in it. And that is something that has changed. And as you rightly say, this the cultural things, we've got people reenacting basically the first Indo-Pakistan War of 1947 on the streets of Leicester, which is all very vibrant and diverse. Thank you very much, Alex. Great to see you. And this one is going to run and run. Let's see what Mrs. Braverman can do about it. All together now. Jabba, 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 said the monkey to the chimp.
Dabba, 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 said the chimpy to the monk. Dabba, 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 said the monkey to the chimp.
But it's last call at the Jabba Jabba Saloon, at least in Scandinavia. Sweden will no longer jab children. Denmark's abandoned the jabs for those under 50. Norway's ended them for most people under 65. The narrative shifts every day, thanks in part to the efforts of a few dogged contrarians like my next guest. So naturally, California's now making it illegal for doctors to disagree with the official version, upon pain of losing their medical license. Well, they're Californians, they're crazy, we all know that. But in Australia, the Parliament of Queensland is introducing a disturbingly similar bill. There they are on the green benches of our beloved Westminster system. And yes, Australians are also crazy, but there are Commonwealth cousins, so the nuttiness is moving closer. And for what it's worth, Baroness Hallett's official inquiry into the UK COVID regime held its first hearing today, and she promises that it's not going to take years like the usual Royal Commission does. Dr. Naomi Wolf was ahead of the game on a lot of this. She's the author of The Bodies of Others, The New Authoritarians, COVID-19 and the War Against the Human. Just first of all, Naomi, things you said a year ago and got you denounced as a conspiracy theorist are now actually being accepted by governments. Do you think things are going your way, as it were?
Well,
It's sad that it takes a year for the rest of the world to catch up with what used to be called journalism, right? I'm not a contrarian. I'm not a conspiracy theorist. I'm a journalist. And I did a year ago exactly what I've done for 35 years, which until 2020 led me to be a darling of the, the established media. But in 2020 and into 2021, when I was reporting accurately on women's health problems that women were reporting subsequent to the mRNA COVID-19 injection, specifically menstrual problems, I was denounced and smeared. A global smear campaign, actually. It was pretty scary. And I was called all kinds of names. And indeed, as you point out, in the last month, NIH, Washington Post, CNN, all of them are confirming that, in fact, millions of women have been harmed in terms of their menstrual health by these mRNA injections. So that's pretty sad, but I'd rather women had the information and could protect themselves going forward, and what happened to me is insignificant compared with that.
Yeah, let's talk about that, because, you know, the thing about these vaccines is they cause almost every conceivable kind of damage. You've been talking about women. They also do terrible things to healthy young men. But let's just stick with the women's thing, because you've been a famous feminist in the Western world for quite a while. These things, as you say, they affect women's menstrual cycles. They're finding the mRNA showing up in breast milk of feeding mothers. There's disturbing trends in fertility. I've just looked at the numbers from Switzerland and Germany and various other continental countries, but I take it it's pretty similar here and in the US. Why is it that feminists aren't interested in what seems to be an obvious women's health issue?
Yeah, I mean, feminists, look, you just had a couple of segments showing that in Britain, as in the United States, civil society has been wholly co-opted by bad actors trying to destroy British civil society, trying to destroy U.S. civil society. My book argues that this is a script, it's been enacted all over the world, especially aimed at the West. So, unsurprisingly, the people who used to be feminists, you know, the Boston Women's Health Collective, the National Organization of Women, the American College of Obstetrics and Gynecology, the doulas, all the people who are supposed to stand up for women's health, were silent. They, you know, all these civil society institutions and the media took the money, whether it was Bill and Melinda Gates money, which went to entities like the BBC, which is why the BBC has attacked me, and you know, now you, or whether it's $1 billion from the CARES Act in the United States that went to trusted messengers to co-opt them to overcome vaccine hesitancy. And I found out very frighteningly that it wasn't just the CDC that was colluding with Twitter. This was revealed through an America First legal lawsuit a couple of weeks ago to silence me and other people, but in my case with this accurate tweet about women's menses being harmed, but also a more recent action by the attorneys general of Missouri and Louisiana have found that the White House was involved. So at the highest levels, there's silencing going on, and it's very parallel to what you showed with this vicar's wife in Britain. At the highest levels, people are being instructed to silence, suppress, coerce, bully the truth about this particular issue.
What's amazing to me is the effect it's had actually on the medical community. I mean, even before you get to this crazy law in California where you can get struck off if you actually have an alternative view to the official version. I mean, I don't know what that's going to do for the standards of medicine. It reminds me, I don't want to exaggerate, but it does remind me of Stalinist Russia, where every time Stalin had a mild ailment, he had to get a all the doctors had to be ideological, which meant they were crap. And so he had to get some non-ideological doctor if he had anything wrong with him. I mean, we're moving into a situation like that, aren't we?
I think we're there. I mean, Mark, I'm Jewish, and you know, I can say this. I don't think you're going too far. I think you're going exactly where you should go. It was the doctors in pre-Nazi Germany in the early 30s who were co-opted by the National Socialists and sent to do exactly what we're seeing kind of replaying now. It was the medical organizations in the early 30s who were emboldened to be the arbiters of, life worthy of life, life unworthy of life, and to kind of medicalize and pathologize dissent or difference. So we're seeing a wholesale purchasing of the medical establishment in the United States, in Britain, and in countries around the world to do things much more serious. But let me just give one example. You brought this up and you're so right. I have 3,500 experts at the War Room Daily Cloud, Pfizer Documents Research, volunteer effort, medical experts, scientific experts going through the Pfizer documents. And indeed, they're finding horrific harms against human reproduction. 360-degree harms. Who should be stepping up to announce this? The AMA. Who's announcing it? It's people like you and me, the last remaining independent journalists. But this is a scandal that the human race has never seen before of such magnitude.
Well, we've talked about it from a woman's point of view. There's also evidence that it's affecting male sperm counts.
Yes.
What I find odd, we had a lady on, Vicky Spitt, who was widowed in her 30s. She lost her husband to the AstraZeneca vaccine, and they held a coroner's inquest. And all the doctors and nurses called to testify said that they didn't know anything about side effects. The only thing they knew about side effects was not from the hospital, not from the medical establishment, but was from just Googling around when they opened up their laptops.
Shocking. Yeah, I know exactly how this silencing is being enforced. Doctors and nurses are coming to us saying that if they even give their patients informed consent, meaning any hint of the massive risks attached now, confirmed with these mRNA injections, they get letters saying they'll be delicensed, and some of them are being delicensed. But, you mentioned the suppression of sperm count. That's absolutely correct, and the journal Andrology reported that. But our team has broken stories even more horrific than that. For instance, Amy Kelly, our team project director, did a report based on the Pfizer documents showing that little boys and baby boys, their Leydig cells and Sertoli cells are damaged by the mRNA injections. That's the factory of masculinity. That's the factory of the hormones that turn boys into men.
Yep.
So this is why I'm not ashamed to say it at this point. I've got so much evidence. This is why I believe these are bioweapons, because they are literally sterilizing people. They're poisoning breast milk. There's not just mRNA in breast milk. There's polyethylene glycol now in vaccinated moms' breast milk. They're damaging the placentas of women so that they can, so that we're seeing chromosomal abnormalities, and they're they're emasculating men essentially.
Just quickly, because we mentioned those Scandinavian governments, they're kind of on the fringe of the developed world. They're very highly developed and very agreeable societies. But there seems to be even now a resistance even to look at this in the US, the UK, and the bigger players.
Right. I mean, it's not surprising. A mass murder has taken place, and it's not over. The evidence, you mentioned the drop in childbirth. There's a 20% drop in newborns being born around the world. There's a doubling of Scottish babies' neonatal deaths.
No, they're reopening one of the investigations.
I mean, yes, I hope it's not a whitewash, but this is a massive crime. Of course they want to sweep it under the rug, because mass murder has not just taken place, it's still taking place. Disabling people into the future, sterilizing the next generation has taken place. But I would say it's linked to these episodes you just showed, because there is a script, and this is my argument in the bodies of others, to turn the West, to get rid of the West, essentially, to turn it into a version of the CCP. It's a version of China, what you're seeing in Britain right now. It's a version of China, what you're seeing in America. And these injections are part of it, and the vaccine passport, which was tied to the injections, are part of it. So they're not going to stop, and they're not going to be honest.
This is a serious charge, one of mass murder, but it's a question that has to be asked, because we're now almost 2 years into these vaccines, and we know they don't, at the very minimum, they were oversold and underperformed. But the question is, when did these public health commissars know that not only they were...
I'm sorry to interrupt. No, I mean, you're
No.
talking, I'm one of the few people, along with my 3,500 experts, who have looked at the Pfizer documents. And I can tell you, they knew from a month after the rollout that they did not work. So the reason I say mass murder with such calmness is that and not only that, the FDA knew, because at the bottom of these documents it says FDA confidential. The FDA has custody of these 50,000 documents that Pfizer was forced to reveal. So they knew that they didn't work. They knew 3 months in that 1,200 people were dead, 4 of them the day they were injected, and they kept going. They knew in April of last year that children's hearts were being damaged a week after the injection, and they kept going.
No, and that is the most serious charge here. And we're in this mess because twits like the BBC guy who hosts Radio 3's Free Thinking show don't think you should even ask about this. It's the biggest public scandal this century. If Western governments knew about the damage right at the beginning, right in those first weeks, and they're still insisting right now that everybody gets the 37th booster shot. Thank you very much, Naomi. We're going to have more with Naomi later in the week. Stump the Steyn looms. You can ask me anything. GBViews at gbnews.uk. And one of my favourite guests is back, Baroness Hoey, on why the Conservative and Unionist Party is sticking it to the Unionists. You won't want to miss that. It's coming right up with Lady Hoey in just a moment.
Weekday afternoons on GB News, we've got the whole of the UK covered. From 12 to 3, it's GB News Day with me, Mark Longhurst.
And me, Gloria Di Piero. You'll get the very latest on everything that's been going on across our great nation.
And from 3 till 6, watch out for GB News Live with me, Patrick Christys. I'm not here to mess around with all the biggest topics and guests. You will always be up to date. GB News Day and GB News Live from 12 p.m.
Only on GB News.
The People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Hello there, it's Eamon Holmes here from Breakfast on GB News. We're not just on your television and your screens, you know.
We're on DAB plus digital radio, so you can listen to your favourite shows on the move.
If you've not yet listened to GB News Radio, it's very simple. We're on your radio player and TuneIn apps, on your smart speaker, phone or tablet, or online at gbnews.uk.
Take us with you wherever you go. GB News Radio.
You never have to miss a moment of the People's Channel.
Join my show Farage, 7 p.m. till 8 p.m. Monday through Thursday. And there you will get opinion, analysis, debate, and I'll cover stories that nobody else dares to touch.
You've been cancelled. Join the club.
Oh my goodness me. And then for the last 15 minutes, talking pints. We're over a drink. We have a civilised conversation with someone. We very often disagree, but we do it in a grown-up way. Come and join me on Farage.
Hello, I'm Simon Evans. Join me on GB News for Headliners at 11 p.m, where I'll be joined by 2 of the country's top comedians as we take a look at tomorrow's newspapers tonight. If it's a big story, we'll be covering it, I guarantee, but we'll also have some fun along the way. That's GB News Headliners at 11 p.m. We won't put you to sleep, unlike some of the other paper review shows out there. So join us, 11 p.m, 7 nights a week.
Steve Baker isn't one of your wimpy squish Tories. He's been a hardcore Brexiteer. He's now the Minister of State for Northern Ireland. And the very first thing he did in his new job was to apologise to Dublin and to Brussels for being too, quote, ferocious during the protocol negotiations and saying that London needs to act with, quote, humility before our friends on the continent and south of the border.
And I'm sorry about that, because relations with Ireland are not where they should be, and we all need to work extremely hard to improve them. And I know that we are doing so. Actually, the demise of Her late Majesty gave us an opportunity to meet leading Irish figures, and I said to some of them, you know, I am sorry that we did not always respect your legitimate interests.
Interesting. Baroness Hoey is a former Labour minister and a doughty Ulster lass herself. What do you make of these remarks by the new minister, Kate?
Well, I must say I was pretty astonished. I did lots of campaign rallies with Steve Baker during the campaign for the referendum, and I never heard him say anything that I would have thought he needed to apologise for. So I can only assume, I'd like to think that he'd taken sort of bad advice from someone, but unless it was from the Northern Ireland office direct, it clearly wasn't from the Prime Minister, because she immediately did seem to distance herself from it, as did a couple of the other cabinet ministers. But I think he's, if I want to be nice, I would say that he's being slightly naive, and he's trying to show, because he was such a hard Brexiteer supporter of leaving the EU, that he has to now prove to the European Union that he's actually changed, that he's beginning to realise that maybe he made a mistake. Or is it that he just wants to show the Irish government that he's prepared to negotiate and talk to them? And underlying it all, is it because really deep down he still wants to settle things, but wants to, if everything goes, as it probably will when the negotiations get going, everything goes wrong, he'll be able to say, well, I did try. It wasn't me, the hard Brexiteer, that made this not work. But whatever reason he's done it, it was rather silly. It won't in any way get reciprocation from either the EU or the Irish government, and has left a lot of people feeling in Northern Ireland just a little bit worried that once again it looks like sometimes the Conservative government is going to throw us under a bus. I mean, I hope that's not true, but you just never know.
No. Well, what's odd to me is that if one were to weigh the competing statements made on this by both London and Dublin, the highest figures in the Irish state have been far ruder in these last couple of years than at Westminster, particularly the previous Taoiseach, Mr. Varadkar. He was kind of merciless in his derision of the United Kingdom. Why doesn't he have to apologise if we're going to do this?
Well, of course, that's exactly what but many of us have said, that he should have been asking the Irish government to apologise for the fact that Varadkar went along with the EU and encouraged the European Union to weaponise the whole question of the past troubles by taking that photograph along. Do you remember he took a photograph along to Brussels, which showed a border post having been blown up by the IRA many years before, and basically saying, if there's any kind of structure along the border, then violence will return. Now, what he should have been saying is, but we will not let terrorists decide our policy. But he didn't do that. And of course, the Irish government has loved the fact that the protocol is helping their economy, because more and more businesses in Northern Ireland are having to go to the Republic to get things that they used to get from Great Britain. So it's a definite apology needs from the Irish government, if not the European Union as a whole.
Do you think Boris Johnson, under whom this happened, and he used to talk about how he didn't want to be called Prime Minister, he wanted to be called Minister for the Union, but he's the guy who essentially agreed to put Northern Ireland within an all-Irish trade zone so that it's easier to ship your goods south than it is to ship them east. That's what the Tories did. If they're now saying, when it's not just that we did it, but we now feel we have to apologise for questioning it, that's not a very good indication of how any resolution of this situation is going to go, is it?
It's certainly not, and it's also not a very good indication of how the Conservatives view the Union, because I think sometimes maybe they feel that Northern Ireland, is different, is separate, and it's we can manage just to sort of keep them a little bit distant. What they don't realise is just how the Union itself would be greatly affected if Northern Ireland was to be forced out, and I do think that they're just. It's just been a drip approach where it always seems as if the British government, our government, Northern Ireland citizens' government, doesn't want to stick up for Northern Ireland people, whereas the Irish government doesn't think there's anything wrong with sticking up for people in Northern Ireland who want to be part of the United Ireland. And of course, the Belfast Agreement, the Good Friday Agreement, absolutely carefully balanced to give that balance, has been has been broken, as Lord Trimble himself said, who was one of the writers of that agreement. It has been broken. So I think the minister may well regret.
Well, that's an interesting point, Kate, because when I listen to ministers in Dublin talking about this issue, the protocol, they talk about the residents of Northern Ireland as a whole, both loyalist and nationalist, as if they're their responsibility. And you don't actually hear many Tory ministers talking like that about Northern Ireland these days.
No, the Irish government does, particularly Simon Coveney, the foreign minister, tends to interfere quite a lot in Northern Ireland, and they seem to have forgotten that part of the Belfast Good Friday Agreement was the Strand 1, which was meant to be internal affairs of Northern Ireland. And Simon Coveney was given a kind of leeway by one of the previous Secretaries of State, Julian Smith, to kind of get involved far, far more than he should be. And I think, it is time that Liz Truss, as Prime Minister of the United Kingdom, recognises that her ministers have to be full heart in support of the Union. Otherwise, quite honestly, what is the point of them even being there as Northern Ireland Secretary if they can't stand up for Northern Ireland and continually kowtow to the Irish government, who have spent their whole time, I have to say, pushing the European Union to be as hardline as possible because they wanted, and the European Union went along with it. So the Irish government could influence the European Union on the protocol if they wanted to. I don't think they want to, and I think Steve Baker, as minister, was very, very silly in what he said.
The Irish, that crowd in Dublin could just tell Brussels, look, we regard this as an internal affair within these islands, and we think it's best you just bud out and we'll come to our own arrangement. And that would be the beginning and end of it. They don't, because they think there's something in it for them here, Kate. It's most disturbing, and to hear supposedly anti-Brexit new ministers giving encouragement to that strand of Irish thinking is very disturbing. Thank you very much, Baroness Hoey. It is always a pleasure. Let's stump it out quickly. Do you think the COVID inquiry will address the vaccine injuries and deaths, says Deborah? Well, it's supposed to. But on the other hand, I'm not expecting much to come from this inquiry, judging from the way they usually go. That'll do it. Dan Wootton is here to wallop your Wednesday. What you got, Dan?
Mark, another great show. What a shocking interview at the top. I just cannot believe what is going on with our police force. Mark, so of course, we'll be talking about Suella Braverman's big speech today as Home Secretary. I thought she did great, actually, but my goodness, when you see what is going on with the police in the country, she has a monumental task ahead, Mark. Plus, we've got Stanley Johnson on the Superstar panel tonight. So what's going on with his son? He'll probably be back in number 10 by December at this rate, right?
Yeah, the world is spiralling backwards. Rishi is supposed to be coming back, and then it'll be Boris. Next thing you know, John Major's going to be back in number 10. That's all with Dan. After the weather, stay safe, stay free.
Good evening, I'm Alex Deakin with your latest weather update. A wet and windy start to Wednesday. A pretty mild start as well. Temperatures won't be falling too far overnight as we see further cloud and rain coming in. This little area of low pressure is developing as it approaches the UK, and that's going to spark the wet and windy conditions for most come tomorrow morning. That rain really picking up at the moment across parts of Northern Ireland. It's going to be a pretty wet night here, but that rain also extending north across Scotland, and we'll see further outbreaks of rain through the night across Wales. Parts of northern England as well, but much of the south and east of England will stay dry, but everywhere it's going to be pretty windy, very cloudy, and that all adds up to a very mild night with temperatures certainly in the south staying in the teens and double digits further north. But it will be a wet and windy start to Wednesday across much of northern Britain and down across Wales. Heavy bursts of rain, a lot of spray and surface water on the roads. Everything being buffeted by those strong winds as well. There are Met Office yellow warnings in place. The rain across the east will arrive late morning into the early part of the afternoon, lingering across East Anglia in the southeast till the middle of the afternoon. Behind that rain, and most places will brighten up through the morning, we'll see sunny spells and showers, but a fresher feel. Temperatures actually could be lower in the afternoon than in the morning, despite some afternoon sunshine. Those gusty winds making it feel cooler And those gusty winds just continuing to throw showers in across Scotland and Northern Ireland as we go through tomorrow night. By the time we get to Thursday, we're left with a mixture of sunshine and showers. Certainly lots of showers, still on a brisk wind for Scotland, Northern Ireland, parts of North Wales, North West England, but not too many showers getting to eastern parts of England or across the South Midlands, South Wales and southern England. Some good spells of sunshine likely on Thursday. Still quite windy, but a bright and blustery day, not as windy as Wednesday, and temperatures a little higher in the mid to high teens.
Weekday afternoons on GB News, we've got the whole of the UK covered. From 12 to 3, it's GB News Day with me, Mark Longhurst.
And me, Gloria Di Piero. You'll get the very latest on everything that's been going on across our great nation.
And from 3 till 6, watch out for GB News Live with me, Patrick Christys. I'm not here to mess around. With all the biggest topics and guests, you will always be up to date. GB News Day and GB News Live from 12 p.m.
Only on GB News.
The People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Hello there, it's Eamon Holmes here from Breakfast on GB News. We're not just on your television and your screens, you know.
We're on DAB plus digital radio, so you can listen to your favourite shows on the move.
If you've not yet listened to GB News Radio, it's very simple. We're on your radio player and